Welcome to Auntie Afoni Story Time Club.
Hello, welcome. Welcome to Auntie Afoni Story Time Club. Have you heard of 20 buyers for one goat? Yes, you heard me. 20 buyers for one goat. That is the title of my story today. Sharpen your comprehension skills. Listen attentively. This story is about Pipiro. Once upon a time, Pipiro in the early part of the year borrowed huge sums of money from his friends and neighbors with a false promise of paying back at the end of the year. Pipiro had no plans, no ideas of how he was going to pay back this money. He had no genuine intention of paying back these monies. Pipiro's second nature was cheating. Pipiro was a cheat, a habitual cheat. He loved to take advantage of people at every given opportunity. He often got into trouble with his friends and neighbors. He never learned from his mistakes. He had the penchant for double dealing. You know the way we say it in local parlance? Wayo, Ujoro will say Pipiro was a Wayo man. Yes, he was. He always thought himself very clever, but often he ended up too clever by half. Always in one trouble or another. With a friend, with a neighbor, with a buyer, with a seller, with someone. He always wanted to defraud anyone who had anything to do with him. Just as the year began, the end of the year also came. Those who lent money to Pipiro began calling on him to pay back. Of course, he had no plans. He had no plans to pay back. Rather than think of what to do to pay back the loans, Pipiro began to think of another plot. He began to hatch another plot, a devious plot. I have to defraud more people and possibly pay back one or two people who were holding on him. This time around, it was a more despicable plan, a more despicable plot, because he employed his only son in this plot. Pipiro had an only son who was a dwarf. Pipiro taught his son how to bleat. Pipiro also had a goat, a dwarf goat. His son was a dwarf. His goat was also a dwarf goat. Pipiro taught his son how to bleat like the goat. And what was his plan? He planned to sell his goat to unsuspecting buyers. He will retrieve his goat, replace the goat with his son, and then have his goat back and his son back, and then he will go again to sell his goat. And in all of these sellings, he was making money. Now, his first victim was a widow in the neighboring village. Unsuspecting widow. She bought the goat from Pipiro. Graciously, Pipiro took the goat to her backyard and tethered the goat for her. Tied the goat for her neatly at her backyard and went home. At the wee hours of the next morning, Pipiro sneaked into the widow's backyard, untied his goat, and then tied his son on the same spot where he had tied that goat the previous day. he loosely tied his son and sneaked out with the goat. His son began to bleat. Nah, nah, nah. Can you bleat? Can you do that? Do you know another animal that can bleat like the goat? Early hours of the morning, the widow came out to check on her goat. She was not only just shocked, she was scared stiff. What's this? I bought a goat. How did the goat turn to a dwarf, an ugly dwarf for that matter? What could have happened? Spirits at work? Did I buy a ghost? Did I trade with a ghost? She was so scared that she screamed and chased this ugly dwarf away from her compound. Oh dear. Oh, did I buy this goat from a ghost or what? How did the goat turn to a dwarf? She slumped into her chair, shocked at what had happened. Now, Pipiro's son craftily ran off like the goat and happily ran home. Pipiro was happy to see his son back. Yes, that was a good outing. And this emboldened Pipiro. Pipiro took his goat from village to village, selling his goat to unsuspecting buyers, tying it for them at their backyards, sneaking back at night to untie the goat, and loosely tie his son in place of the goat. And thereafter he will have his son back, he will have his goat back, he will have the money in his pocket. And yet, Pipiro did not pay back any of his creditors. He kept giving them excuses. He kept postponing the payment. Pipiro continued to do this from village to village, from village to village, from village to village. Now, a 20th buyer came. But this man had heard about Pipiro and his cow, and he was out to deal with Pipiro for being a scammer. He bought Pipiro's goat, paid. Pipiro graciously took the goat to his house for him and neatly tied the goat at the backyard. When Pipiro left, the man also devised his own plot. He dug a big pit at the escape route from his backyard and lightly covered the deep pit with grasses. At night, he lay ambush and waited for Pipiro. Of course, Pipiro was now a smooth scammer. It was working very well for him. Pipiro sneaked into his backyard, smartly untied the goat, and neatly and loosely tied his son in place of the goat. As he made his way to escape from the backyard, in the pit, Pipiro fell into the pit with his dwarf goat. He tried to come out, no way, because the man made the pit very deep. He wanted to be sure that the pit will hold Pipiro till morning, and that was exactly what happened. Pipiro could not climb out from the pit. His son was tied. Morning came. The entire household rushed out to the pit. Pipiro was in the pit. The news went round the village. People were rushing to go and see Pipiro in the pit with his goat, and his son died. There and then, the message got to Pipiro's kinsmen that Pipiro had been caught. His kinsmen were so upset with Pipiro. While he was still in the pit, they called on all those who were waiting for Pipiro to pay them back, all his creditors, all those he was owing. His kinsmen called all of them together and shared out everything that belonged to Pipiro amongst them. His land, his houses, everything he owned, everything that belonged to Pipiro was shared out while he was still in the pit. And when they had done that, they moved to the next village. They moved to that village where he was in the pit and brought him out. Pipiro was so ashamed of himself. The whole village booed at him. A man who wouldn't do anything decent, just looking for people to defraud, always plotting to defraud others. Pipiro went home in shame and in disgrace. He learned his lesson a very hard way. He became a poor man. He had nothing again. And so ended his life of cheating and defrauding people. Wow. Thank you. Now let me ask you, are there lessons from this story about Pipiro? Are there lessons? Did you learn anything? Yes, I'm sure you did. I'm going to mention just two, and I'll leave you to tell me the others. Pipiro learned to cheat because he grew up lazy. Laziness is one vice that fuels cheating. When you are not learning to do things for yourself, whenever you have a need, you will want to defraud the next person. Cheating comes from laziness. You must not be a lazy child. You must not think of cheating someone. Learn to do things for yourself. Pipiro had land. He could have been a farmer. He had hands, he had legs. He could have learned a trade. But because he grew up a lazy child, when it was time for him to raise his own family, he had nothing to do. He couldn't think of anything to do other than to cheat people. Laziness and cheating are brothers. Don't be a lazy child. If you're a lazy child, you will end up cheating people. All right? Good. Now you will send me your own messages and tell me also what you learned from this story. Okay? Good. Remember, keep working hard. Do things on your own. Keep doing your duties properly. And don't ever think of cheating the next person. All right? Till I come back with another interesting story. Let me say now, bye.